Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter, or of course you can find me right here on this channel if you hit that subscribe button. You can also find me in snowy London town. We went out tonight, whole family, had something to eat. When we came out of the establishment, we'd realised that the snow had built up to like 3 or 4 inches, and my brother decided that he was going to make a declaration of war. He picked up a snowball, threw it, smacked me right in the throat, went down my top. I was freezing cold. So I thought, okay, listen, if you come for the king, you better take the king out, right? And this fool didn't have the right shoes on, so he's slipping all over the place in the snow. I was like the snowball sniper out there. I was smacking him in the eyeball, in the ear, upside the head with snowballs from all directions. It was a devastating assault, and he's slipping all over the place, falling on the floor in the street, people cracking up. I'm going to show you some photos. In fact, it was terribly, terribly embarrassing. But let this be a moral of the story. If you are ever going to a snowball fight, don't wear ballerina shoes. Moving on from that, now I've yet to see the Crawford-Avanesyan fight, but the knockout is all over Twitter, and I have to do a little technical breakdown of this because it's absolutely beautiful. You can see here that Avanesyan is leaning essentially on Crawford. He's got that wide stance, very solid base beneath him. He's not going to get pushed around at this point. Avanesyan is also safe. So Crawford decides to push him off to create space. As he's pushed him off to create that separation, he knows that the moment that happens and the reset of Avanesyan's feet occurs, when he finds his balance following that little push, he knows that he's in a position whereby Avanesyan can throw a punch. So once he resets into that position, ready for what Avanesyan's going to throw, you can see that he's slightly off center and he's got his left hand by his chin. If Avanesyan throws a right hand from here, he will catch that shot or he will parry that shot. If Avanesyan was to decide to throw a looping wide left hook, you can see that his shoulder's also tucked in front of the chin. So really the only shot that's available to Avanesyan from here, if he's going to choose to punch, is a jab through the center line. Because of that, TerenceCrawford is prepared for this. And when the jab comes in, you can see that he rolls with that shot and lifts the lead arm up just to deflect slightly the bottom of the elbow of Avanesyan, to parry it away, to take something off of the potential power. And by rolling, he's also taking something off of the shot, but he's also loading up for that backhand uppercut. But the uppercut is not the beautiful thing about this particular sequence, because as he lands the uppercut here, from this position, most fighters would instantly throw the right hand. He's landed the uppercut, they throw the right hand. The problem from here, though, is that because of the angles of the two fighters, if he throws the right hand, he's going to land on the glove. Even after landing the uppercut, if he lifts his head, if he throws the right hand, he can only land if he comes behind the guard. So what does TerenceCrawford do? I want you to look at his lead foot. As he lands the uppercut, that lead foot comes back. Now, this might look like a big deal to you, but what it's done is it's squared Crawford on in a safe area, because he knows he's engaged Avanesyan, and Bud often squares on inside the pocket, something you shouldn't typically do, but he's so understanding of his position and his opponent's position, he knows when to do this. Now by doing that, he's created a new angle. Now he doesn't have to come around the guard to land the right hand, he can come inside the arc of the guard. This is also a typical karate stance, quite square on, knees slightly bent, feet shoulder width apart, and the fist is around the sort of chest height. A bit lower, I guess you could say, is a typical karate shot, but typically speaking, it can come from there. Now, a lot of people give a lot of stick to karate, but actually, while karate has some limitations for a lot of people, when you're too square on, it can affect your mobility. In terms of sheer production of power from both sides, there's a lot of torque and rotation when you are square on. And so as he then throws the shot from here, not only is he going to get maximum power, you can see him come inside the guard without much of a loop. It's still a hook, but he can come inside the guard of Avanesyan, and he lands directly on the button and takes him out. Absolutely beautiful stuff. Joe Louis type skills there from TerenceCrawford. And let's talk about TeofimoLopez and SnowBall. I saw this fight last night and I was watching it almost like I guess you could say a performance analyst or a trainer, in that I was so engrossed in how Teofimo was trying to close the gap, try to enter the pocket, and how SnowBall was trying to stop him from doing that. And I was looking at the minor adjustments that needed to be made and that weren't being made and things like that. And as a result, I wasn't scoring the fight round by round. But when I was asked on Twitter how I felt the fight was going, I felt that TeofimoLopez was winning the fight. But the commentary team of Michaela Bayer and Christina Poncha felt that it was actually SnowBall that was winning the fight. So I rewatched it today and I scored it. And I had TeofimoLopez winning the fight 95-94. So 6 rounds to 4. There was, of course, a knockdown in there, hence only the single point difference. I did have 4 swing rounds. And I gave 3 of those swing rounds to SnowBall. So, yes, if I gave all 4 to Martin, I can see how the result is a little bit different. But ultimately, I felt that the right man got the job done. For clarity, I gave 1, 3, 4, 6, 9, and 10 to TeofimoLopez. The others I gave to SnowBall. The only swing round that I did give to Teofimo was the 3rd. The other swing rounds I felt were the 5th, 7th, and 8th. So they're the rounds that could have gone either way. So I felt the right man got the job done. But it wasn't a vintage performance. And Reza asked me pre-fight how I felt the fight would go. Shout out to him. And I basically replied to say, it's a raw test, but I think he will come through it. It could be a hard fight, though, and that can affect the public's view of Teofimo's level. And I think that's basically what we've seen here. SnowBall was a 7-1 underdog. And so a lot of people felt that Teofimo should deal with him, fairly comfortably. And as a result of that, I think they're now undermining him. His stock has fallen, so to speak, because of expectation versus reality. Whereas because I always knew this would be a difficult fight, I'm impressed with the fact that he managed to come through it. And I do feel, like I said, he deserves to come through it. But there are elements there which will cause him problems when it comes to adjusting to 140 pounds, unless he makes certain changes to his game. And I believe that those changes can be brought about by none other than EddyReynoso. I think he'd be the perfect trainer for him, and we'll get to that in a moment. First, let's talk about what was happening in the fight and where Teofimo was struggling and where he was having success. There was a clear approach from SnowBall to take half a step back and maintain range. And every single time Teofimo would try to jump in, his aim was essentially to land something with the lead right hand and then turn to his right, pivot out and get out from the right hand side, or simply to take half a step back, land that right hand. He wasn't looking to bring a backhand into play too often. So it was really a case of how TeofimoLopez is going to close that range. One of the problems that Teofimo has is that, traditionally speaking, his skill set is that of a counter puncher. At 135 pounds, he would basically want you to come into range, and if you let go of a shot, he will roll with the shot, come back with a big power shot. He is looking at your patterns. He's looking to find openings so he could set up a big power shot. Really good feet, really good agility, fantastic power and accuracy, very creative with his punches, really has some elite level skills, there's no doubt about it. But he's not a big 135 pounder in terms of his height and range. Keith Thurman a number of years ago was asked in an interview, what do you need in order to step up through the weight categories? And Keith Thurman explained, a lot of people feel like it's, big power punch and it's got to be able to carry through the weight categories. Keith was saying, actually, it's your frame that matters more. If you're tall and you've got a long reach and you've got broad shoulders, you're going to be able to pack mass onto that and still be able to be effective with regards to distance. Whereas if you're not particularly tall, it's going to be difficult against guys that want to maintain range against you. Now, TeofimoLopez was considered a big lightweight because of the mass. He's got big lats, he's got some big thighs, his shoulders are muscular, his neck's quite muscular for a lightweight, but he's not tall. You look at someone like George Kambosos, who's a pretty average size lightweight in terms of his frame, and he was taller than TeofimoLopez. You look at a guy like Ryan Garcia or Devin Haney, they're a lot bigger than TeofimoLopez. And you look at guys like Lomachenko and Tank, they're really small lightweights. So you're getting a division there where you've got guys that really deviate in their size. But when it comes to Teofimo, the reason he was big was because of the muscle mass rather than the height and reach. So as a result, when he's stepping in against SnowBall, he looked quite small. He's more naturally muscular, or perhaps he's bulked up to be that muscular. But if you look at the skeletal frame, who's taller, who's got the broader shoulder from point to point beyond the muscle, we're just talking about the skeleton of the person. SnowBall's the bigger man. And because he's concerned with maintaining range, now you have a guy who's a pressure fighter. Who's not a natural pressure fighter, having to become a hunter, having to become a pressure fighter. And whilst Teofimo at 135 was able to initiate examples where a guy would come into attack and he would counter that, he's still countering. He's putting a guy in a position where he's setting traps for a guy to bite on, little bait for a guy to bite on, and he's then capitalizing on that. Guys like Lomachenko, they're so small, he has to come to TeofimoLopez in order to be effective. Well, it's in that zone, in that pocket, that you can be effective. When you need to chase to get in the pocket, it becomes a different style of fight. And this is why I totally understood that he would have problems here tonight. It's the same sort of problem that Kambosos had against Devin Haney. And for those that looked at the preview for the second fight, you'll know what I'm talking about here when I'm explaining that it's the question of trying to get beyond the edge of the spear and getting inside the reach of that spear in order for the swordsman to go to work. And so the same problems that Kambosos had against Haney, Teo was having last night against Sandor Martin. Now, I don't think Martin is as sharp as Devin Haney. I don't think he's as technically gifted as Devin Haney, but he's perhaps more durable than Devin Haney. So he can take a shot, hold a shot, I think, possibly more effectively than Devin. So I wouldn't rule out Teofimo beating Devin in that regard, but stylistically, Devin would be a problem for Teo. And he would have to be the favourite, in my opinion, unless Teofimo is able to adjust in certain ways, which we'll talk about here. But he was taking a step to the outside often, and he was launching that right hand to the solar plexus. And this was going under the radar a lot with Michaela Mayer and Christina Poncha. And it's almost the same sort of thing when we saw Anthony Yarde fight Lyndon Arthur in the first fight. And I spoke about this at the time. Body shots count, right? You can't just dismiss them. But he was quite one-dimensional with regards to that. And one of the reasons is because as he's stepping in, lunging in, leaning that weight over that lead foot, and he's reaching with that backhand, he's now in a position whereby he's leant forward so much, he either has to reset by pulling back to get his balance beneath him again, or he needs to bring the back foot closer to go to work from there. Because Sandor Martin, every time the step in would come, he'd throw a shot and then pivot out to the right and maximize distance again. TeofimoLopez had that problem with coming in and working. Once you're in and you've lunged in, how do you then go to work if your opponent has stepped back again? So it became almost like a game of tag. I'm either going to bypass your lead shot and land my own, or you're going to catch me as I'm coming in, or I'm going to catch you and you're going to counter me. And so it's almost like it's one after the other. And this is why a few of those rounds were quite close. Now, in the rounds where Teofimo was outlanding Sandor Martin, I was giving them to TeofimoLopez. In the rounds where Sandor Martin was the one that was outlanding him, I was giving those rounds to Sandor Martin. And Teofimo was basically looking to take away the lead hand by engaging it with his own lead hand, jabbing at it, hooking it, throwing an uppercut on it. He's taking away the lead hand and making it a backhand sort of fight. But because of that problem with the distance and he couldn't get close, he couldn't build a second phase of attack. Now, the guy that needs to, in my opinion, bring that skill set together is EddyReynoso. I want you to imagine that rather than him just relying on upper body movement and looking to slip that first shot to come inside, imagine he was able to get his feet closer because he's coming in behind a high guard whilst maintaining the upper body movement and agility that he has. Who does that remind you of? Well, that's Canelo Alvarez. And what Canelo's able to do as well is fight off the beat. So as he leans forward with that high guard, sometimes he'll lean forward and come back up, swing back in like a pendulum. And as he's come down, he'll then throw a punch. Or he could come forward, not do anything, pause, then throw a punch off the beat. Come inside and pretend not to throw anything as though he's not going to do anything. And as he's stepping out, he throws the jab. And so as a result of that, he's really hard to read. And as he throws those shots and backs you up onto the ropes, keeps his feet beneath him, comes in close, when he then backs you up onto the ropes, that's when he lets the combinations go. And that's when the heavy-handed variation of his shots can take effect. When TeofimoLopez was getting Sandor Martin up on the ropes last night, he would often throw one big shot to the head because he's excited to get so close, and he would either miss or perhaps land something, clip something, and then he's getting tied up. When was the last time you saw Canelo Alvarez getting tied up consistently? He's very good at not allowing that to happen. So when you consider the fact that they're both agile guys, smaller in terms of height, shorter than the opponents they're typically operating against, they're both heavy-handed guys with both punches. They're both guys that are counter-punchers by nature. Well, now you can see how somebody like EddyReynoso could potentially instill the concept of making him into a counter-punching pressure fighter, where he brings his feet in closer and he's able to go to work in that way. If you noticed last night in the ninth and certainly in the final rounds, one of the areas that Teofimo had some success in is when he was feinting to throw the backhand low. So he'd throw a throwaway punch. He would throw it, but it's a throwaway punch because what he was really trying to do is rather than lunge his way over that lead foot to become, to try and push through the target, he's throwing that shot, and then from there he's throwing a second backhand. So he's throwing the shot to close the range to the body, but really he's setting up the second backhand. And that second backhand will be so sudden, that second right hand, that it would catch Sandor Martin before he could even pivot out, snap his head back, and then it allows Teofimo to continue the forward momentum to take him inside, all because he was able to close the range by keeping his feet close to him. So when a lot of people are saying his power's not going to carry at 140, I don't think that's necessarily the case, because he's been affecting his last 240-pound fighters when he's been landing. The question is, How do you land beyond that single shot? If you're only looking for that single shot and the vast majority were to the solar plexus, it's going to be very hard to knock out a very durable guy like SnowBall. You've got to be able to wear him down and then put your shots together in combinations when your feet are still close enough to be able to find a home for the target. You've got to be varied with that, and you've got to know how to cut off the ring while stopping yourself from being tied up. And so for me, EddyReynoso is the key to potential success for TeofimoLopez. Let me know what you think about all that, ladies and gents. Really quickly, let me also touch upon JaredAnderson. You know, I'm going to do a proper technical breakdown video on JaredAnderson one day. But one of the things I think he's fantastic at, and I've said this for a very long time, is his agility. But there are certain things he has some problems with. He's got great agility, great stamina. He puts shots together very well. And he's potentially the star of the heavyweight division moving forward. But I was chatting to Leon Canteen, shout out to Leon, and he was basically saying that he feels that JaredAnderson is already a top 10 heavyweight. I don't. Whilst I think he's brilliant, you saw the fight against Jerry Forrest, he was getting lit up in that first round. And one of the reasons he was getting lit up is because a lot of his movement, although agile, is very predictable. He has this thing where he comes semi into range, and as you throw a straight hand, he'll literally lean back and come back forward with a counter shot. He'll literally pull back, come back forward. It's essentially a pull counter. He'll either lean back in a straight way or slightly off, but he's leaning back and coming back with a right hand. And it's a pull counter, but it's consistent. It's every time you throw the shot. A pull counter needs to be disguised. Otherwise, you can be timed. It's like a pendulum. You're coming back, but then when you're coming back forward, you're going to walk onto something. And if you don't get your distance quite right, and as you pull back, you get caught, you're going to eat that shot flush. And his head also stays on the line far too often when he's letting go of his own shots. If he's not evading and he's in the middle of combinations, he can get caught with left hooks. And you saw Jerry Forrest land a number of them. Now you're able to take them against the likes of Jerry Forrest, who's a wily old character, a wily old vet, good fighter. He's a really good gatekeeper that can test the guy. So as a win, it is a terrific win. To stop him in the second round, absolutely superb. Go and look at some of the fights that Jerry Forrest has had and some of the performances he's given. On paper, that's fantastic. But he was in real trouble against Jerry Forrest potentially in the first part of that first round. And even when he was on top and he threw 114 punches in one sequence when Forrest was up against the ropes, he was still getting caught with sporadic left hooks. And that's why the referee couldn't stop the fight, because he was still getting caught and he was still throwing back Forrest, which is another thing you have to wonder about. The punch and power of JaredAnderson, because if you're a heavyweight and you're throwing 114 punches and a guy isn't getting sparked out of there, doesn't matter how durable he is, there are question marks over power. Now he's still young, maybe still going to develop some man strength, but I also notice that often the way he pushes through a shot, there isn't snap there. I think there's some work that needs to be done on the punching technique of JaredAnderson as well. But these are all things that I believe he can overcome. I do believe this is a future world champion. I do believe he can become a superstar. But those elements of changing up the predictability, getting the head off the line, coming a bit lower in certain exchanges, you know, not always being that head on a stick, and improving punching technique, these things can take him a long way. The reason I don't agree with Leon the Canteen about him being a top 10 heavyweight at the moment is because I have very little doubt that the likes of Fury, Usyk, AJ Wilder, Joyce, Ruiz and Jalilov would beat him today. And that's 7 guys. Well, that means if he's top 10, he would have to be in the top 3 of the likes of Dillian White, Joseph Parker, Zhang, Hrgovic, Frank Sanchez, Hunter, Ortiz, Dubois, Huey Fury, Bakoli, Makhmedov, Gassiev, Zhang, Kosobutsky, Ajagba, Franklin, Valine and Miller. Those are some good heavyweight names right there. And a lot of those above names, if they had landed the shots that Jerry Forrest had landed last night, he could have been in serious trouble. So whilst his ceiling is absolutely massive, he's still a prospect, in my opinion. I didn't get to see the Keyshawn Davis fight, unfortunately, and Xander Zayas, I thought his performance was fantastic, and I've been raving about him now for a couple of years, and I've yet to bring a prospect watch video about the guy. We're gone beyond the point of him being a prospect watch type video now, because he's a prospect that everybody knows about. But over the course of the Christmas and New Year period, I will do a technical breakdown on his general workings, because I'm a massive fan of his. I think he's fantastic, so we'll talk a lot about him moving forward. But for this particular video, if you did enjoy this, please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button and an uppercut on the notifications button. Thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.